Should I start?
Yeah, go ahead.
Welcome to the Canadian Philosophy Show. Tagen Marshall, my favorite co-host. Tagen of Vancouver Island University. Tagen, are you almost done? Have you almost graduated? Are you almost
Yeah.
Are you doing the honors program, by the way?
Let's hope. Let's hope I can keep up the marks and keep up the progress to get there. I would love to do that. Yeah.
You can do it. Did you know I was the first honors graduate in philosophy? They had just started the program. In fact, part of the reason they started is because I wanted it. And and there was a difference of opinion amongst the professors as to whether they should institute an honors program in philosophy. At least one or two of the professors, I know one for sure, I won't name names, thought that it was unnecessary, that there was no value in it. But I'm going to disagree with that because in my research of graduate schools, I found several programs. This might interest you, Tagen. I found several PhD programs, and one of the requirements, if you wanted to go straight from a undergraduate degree to a PhD program, you needed to have graduated with honors. Otherwise, you would have to do the master's programs. I don't know what your interest is going to be, but it is theoretically possible to go straight from a bachelor's of arts into a PhD program and skipping the master's program, but the requirements are more stringent, and so honors could make the difference.
Yeah. Although maybe I am just egotistical, perhaps, but I do kind of like the idea of having both accreditations under your belt.
Oh, you mean the master's degree or the honors degree?
I mean
both?
I mean the master's degree, but maybe that's just because I like systems and so I don't like to jump a rung on the ladder, if you know what I mean. Oh hey, I see we have a comment. I'm just checking the YouTube.
Oh yeah, that's Kameshwari Kate. I'm eager to hear this topic. Thanks for picking this one. I don't think she's talking about the masters versus PhD programs. I think she's talking about what's going to be our topic, which you'll introduce shortly, I hope. Yeah, go ahead and introduce the topic, unless you wanted to talk more about master's degrees and so on.
No, we will spare the listeners the academic banter of Mikey and I, and we will get straight to it. So welcome, folks, to the Canadian Philosophy Show. As Mikey has already stated, tonight's topic is enthralling. In fact, it's very thought-provoking. As you know, if you tuned in last week, we started to talk about Viktor Frankl, a Jewish psychologist and psychiatrist during the Second World War, who created what has become known as logotherapy. I did look up a definition before the show, but somehow the tab has decided to just close on me completely. So, basically, logotherapy is based on the premise that a person's primary motivation is his search for meaning and purpose. His search for meaning in particular. I add purpose in there, I don't know why. But the search for meaning. It's important to... Oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to bookmark that. Is there a distinction between purpose and meaning? Let's get back to that. That actually might be significant. But go ahead.
Okay, so it's important to note how this differs from the... Actually, before I get into how it differs from the other psychological theories of the day, let me tell you just briefly about Viktor Frankl himself. Viktor Frankl, this is where I feel very unorganized, but we gotta roll with it. Viktor Frankl, as I mentioned, was a prominent psychiatrist before the Second World War, who when the war began was taken to, I think it was 4 or 5 different concentration camps. And Viktor Frankl saw that, and he describes it this way in Man's Search for Meaning, that the life in the concentration camp, actually I'll pull up the direct quote because it's an impactful quote. Why is nothing working for me tonight?
Hey, while you're looking for your notes, I have a few notes from my existentialism class on Frankl, which, when you're ready, I can read to you what they say.
Why don't you go ahead while I find this?
According to Frankl, the quest for meaning in life does not necessarily mean that somebody has a mental illness or depression. So existential angst, and what we've been talking about in the last couple months on this show, at various times we've talked about existential anxiety and angst and that kind of thing. And according to Frankl, those things, those emotions that are discussed by existentialists are not necessarily mental illness or depression. They can be positive things. They're not necessarily neurosis. They come from the existential void, and they are the impetus for a quest for meaning. And so that's my notes indicate that that's one of the ways that Frankl is distinguished from the more mainstream psychotherapists, in that Frankl sees existential anxiety and angst and forlornness, the things we've talked about, as positive things, not neuroses.
It's true. I think. Thanks for that little primer there, Mikey, as I tried to get organized. I'm going to have to paraphrase because for whatever reason my text isn't letting me go back. We can only go forward. This is the journey of the existentialist itself. We can't go back. We can only go forward. Viktor Frankl describes life in the concentration camp as tearing open the human soul. Because the concentration camp, as we all can agree, is probably one of the darkest places that we can visualize in modern history. He noticed as he was interacting with fellow people within the camp that men were dying exponentially just because they had given up hope. They had no meaning in their life. And so he developed logotherapy to try and help those people within the concentration camps discern what their meaning and then their action, which I would call their purpose, was to be. And that emotion that Mikey just talked about, Viktor Frankl calls existential frustration. That man's will to meaning, his will to find meaning, can be frustrated. It can be interrupted by things going on around him or experiences he's had. That anxiety as Mikey said, drives us to something. And the importance of, and this importance of having meaning, which is separate and apart from other people, I think is also important. I don't know if I'm making sense. Somehow I feel like I'm not making sense, but Mikey, maybe you can confirm.
No, you are. You are, but I had a couple questions.
Please.
So people that were in concentration camps, many of them, if not most of them, were killed by the Nazis. So just to be clear, because what you said before might lead someone to believe that that it was their attitudes or their lack of meaning or their pain or their guilt that killed them. But wasn't it the Nazis that killed the people in the concentration camps?
Absolutely, but I'm saying those that were used for labor,
right,
were struggling to find meaning. But absolutely, what I mean is they struggled to find hope in the circumstances, which led, because you see people literally running up to show the fact that it is such a dark place. You see people running up and throwing themselves at the electric fence because they did not want to live in this situation, which is fair enough. We totally understand why that is. But Viktor Frankl attempts to give them a reason to continue living.
Right. Well, yeah. I know that one of the existentialist principles, and Sartre lays this out, is that no matter what one's external circumstances, no matter one's external constraints, it's still possible to find meaning, however oppressive or limited one's options are. That's one of the more controversial aspects of existentialism, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
And that is because you as the individual are able to dictate what you want your life to be, how you react. Viktor Frankl also presents the idea, not directly, but I've heard it discussed this way, that you have no control of what happens to you, but you do have control in how you react to it.
Right.
And so Viktor Frankl is trying to help people with logotherapy to see their meaning, to see what they're passionate about, to see what drives them, so that they can see their value, so that they can see a purpose to their existence. This is why I was hesitant to say by looking back, because logotherapy is distinctly different from some of the psychological viewpoints of the day, particularly of Freud, that said that man's motive is to focus on the burdens of the past. Frankl doesn't do that.
Right.
He says the individual must look towards the future. They must look to discover their meaning, so that they can in a sense live the fullness of life. And so what I wanted to talk about was a couple things, and this was the first day back for the second semester, so my brain is a little more scattered than it usually is during these things. But I wanted to have a discussion about how some people might respond to Frankl's viewpoint that the primary motivation of man is to have meaning, because I agree with it. but I don't think a philosopher like Friedrich Nietzsche would. I think Nietzsche would say it is man's will to power. But is that will to power actually a covering up of the actual lack of meaning in that person's life, so they're trying to create meaning itself? What do you think, Mikey?
So you're saying that Nietzsche says that people's primary motivation is power, to get more power?
Mm-hmm. Look at Nietzsche's idea of master and slave morality. Mm-hmm. The master is one who constantly is trying to climb the ladder of success, trying to empower himself, mm-hmm. despite the repercussions. Is that real? My thing is, I wonder if Frankl would look at that and say that is actually an individual who is struggling to find meaning, and mm-hmm. so is trying to compensate by almost strength and ability over actual individual recognition of meaning and, in a sense, purpose.
Well, why is that not meaning? Why couldn't we say that someone who is aspiring to become rich and powerful and accumulate unlimited amounts of wealth and power, and perhaps that person is also cheats and is cruel and malevolent to others and is a psychological egoist, all in the name of acquiring more and more wealth and more power? And we can think of people in the world in history and in contemporary times who are like that. Why couldn't we say, and I'll pose this as a question for discussion, why couldn't we say that that indeed is a person who's created meaning in their lives? Why isn't that entirely consistent with existentialism in general, or Frankl in particular? If one chooses as his or her meaning in life to accumulate a maximal amount of wealth and power, why is that not being
because true meaning,
yeah,
as true meaning, true purpose, to quote Aristotle, equals happiness and flourishing. The accumulation of wealth, the accumulation of power is a constant struggle. It's that old adage that, money doesn't make you happy. It's true. Why is that? Because there is no fulfillment. Versus when we are able to discover our abilities, whether that is artistic abilities, say you're incredibly gifted in painting, and that is something you enjoy doing, or for Mikey, maybe not you, maybe you're done with philosophy, I don't know, I assume not, but like the passion you have and the expertise you have for philosophy, that brings you meaning, because it is something that you already possess. It is not something you are trying to possess. It is something you already innately possess within yourself. The accumulation of wealth is something that can never be actually fulfilled.
Okay, well, let me challenge you on that, Tagen. It's not that I disagree with you. It's that I want to challenge you. Go
ahead.
I want to suggest that you're being dogmatic in that statement. Shot. Yeah. Here's my. I want to challenge you, and have you answer to the suggestion that you're being dogmatic, because who are you, and sort of righteous in your opinion, because who are you to say that people, or at least some of the people that are pursuing wealth and power, aren't fulfilled and aren't happy? What comes to mind are, is sort of the image of a person that has a lot of money and perhaps runs his or her own companies and has a lot of employees who do most of the work, and the person I'm thinking of doesn't actually do a lot of work other than to make decisions and bark orders and that sort of thing. And that person, has a nice mansion in the south of France, or has the ability to go spend a lot of time in Caribbean islands and relax on the beach, and with all say it's a man, like with all his money, he can have women all around him, surrounding him, and he can have the best food. Who are we to say that that person's not happy? Who are we to say that person hasn't found fulfillment? Perhaps that person has.
Perhaps. But is that actually fulfilling the void within that person? Or is that just a constant, is that a band-aid to the deeper realization that there is an emptiness that we use and we fill with material possessions, sexual pleasures, etc. That's a good question. But is that person, going back to Aristotle, is that person actually truly flourishing? Are they experiencing true happiness?
Well, that's a good question, and I don't want to belabor this question. I wanted to raise the question of whether it's this isn't a personal attack on you, Tagen, but in general, is there arrogance involved in making the kinds of judgments that you're suggesting, which is the judgments that Aristotle made, in fact, that and many other philosophers have made, the judgments they've made, the evaluative positions they've taken about what constitutes bona fide meaning in life and what constitutes the meaningless pursuit of physical pleasures. So anyway, it's a question I just wanted to raise, and we'll let our listeners think about that question. But also I wanted to raise another challenge to Frankl, maybe a couple challenges, and let you respond. So to the extent that Frankl is forward-looking, whereas Freud is backward-looking, I might pose a challenge to Frankl in that he ignoring some important things about people's psyches. Is it really true that you can disregard the types of traumas from one's past and childhood, unresolved childhood issues and so on from one's past that Freud was so intent on working with and with his patients? Can one really disregard those things and pretend as though we now have a clean slate to do whatever we want with our future? Is that ignoring the fact that our past is part of our present and hence part of our future? And then the second a possible objection to Frankl and other existentialists, and Sartre too, Sartre also, I want to raise, is that is it really true that no matter what one's environment, being in prison or being in a concentration camp or having severe physical disabilities or illness, is it really true that it's possible to find fulfillment and meaning in life? Or is it more realistic to say that we are affected by and constrained by, that our emotional states, that our inner life is indeed objectively affected by external constraints, and that it's sort of a pie in the sky concept to think that no matter what our external constraints, no matter how horrible the concentration camp is and our impending death is, that we can still find what Frankl called the optimist triad of love, faith, and hope. Is that realistic? So I'm raising those two questions. These are just challenges to Frankl. So one, can we ignore our past? And two, can we ignore our constraints? And in the face of the worst oppression uh, remain in love, faith, and hope. What do you think?
Well, I'm thinking about what I'd think. Because I want it noted to our listeners right here and right now that I do not claim to be a Frankl expert whatsoever.
Right.
You know, I have only read him a little bit, and I would have liked to have been more prepped tonight, but, you know, education and stuff like that. So if I speak anything out of turn that I find out later to be inaccurate, I apologize. And this is why I always encourage you, go look at Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, because that's primarily what we're referencing. It's still in print. You can get it on Amazon and other places. Great read, and I plan on reading it in its entirety. But I don't think Frankl is saying that we disregard. But I think he is saying that we must separate ourselves to some extent so that we can look at those experiences and say, yeah, those shaped us, those created us, but we can't be in a space where we let those define us. And Frankl loved, I'm gonna bring up Frankel's wife, because Frankl loved his wife. He was 24 at the time, and his brother was murdered, his father was murdered, his wife was murdered. He said, or I've heard it said, that he lived through the concentration camps to see her again. That didn't happen for him. But when we talk about, do we negate our past experiences? Of course we don't negate them. But we can't let ourselves be consumed by them. We can't let them dictate how we react to everything. We can learn from them. I think Frankel's saying, absolutely, look at those, learn from those, embrace those, but do not let them consume you. Do not let your emotions consume you. Do not let your fears consume you. Frankl was asked in an interview after everything, was asked by an interviewer, and I quote, "Do you hate the German race?" And Frankl reportedly said, and I get this from another source, so don't directly quote me, but he said, of course not. That's a pretty bold statement. Why did he say that? Because he said, there are two types of people in the world. Two codes for people in the world. That of the decent and that of the indecent. And if you look at it that way, this brings me to the second part I wanted to touch on. I have no idea how much time we have left. How much time do we have left?
We have about 25 minutes, so plenty of time.
Perfect. First, I want to get your thoughts, Mike, and what you think by my analysis of the answer to your question, and then maybe if you want to share on what you think of Frankel's claim that there are two types of codes, that of the decent and the indecent, what you think of that statement, and then if you have any questions, I can respond using that.
I think you had an excellent reply to my my objections to Frankl. As I understood your reply, with regards to looking to one's past, which we attributed to Freud, and looking to the future that we attributed to Frankl, you pointed out that it's not all or nothing. So my question suggested that it's one or the other, and it's not. You're saying that Frankl doesn't say we shouldn't look at our past, it's just that we shouldn't be consumed by it, and the emphasis should be on the future. So I really like that answer, that it's a question of balance, not a question of one or the other, the latter being a false dilemma. I really like that. And then, and the second, your answer to my second question was also really good, because you pointed out that that indeed it is possible. In fact, I'll add to your answer, we have many examples of people, and including people in concentration camps, including Anne Frank, and including Frankl himself, you're saying, right? Who did find meaning, who have in fact find meaning. We have empirical evidence of people who, under the harshest circumstances, under the harshest external realities, have nonetheless found meaning. So that's empirical proof that it could be done. And again, it's not all or nothing. So Frankl didn't say that your environment, and Sartre didn't say that your environment has no bearing, has no effect. It certainly does. It create forlornness, and and anxiety, and your environment can limit your options, but that doesn't mean that there aren't any options. So I really like your answer, which in both questions, your answer was that let's not go into false dilemmas here.
Yeah.
Is that sound right? Yeah.
Yeah, and exactly. And like I said, this is just my own extrapolation. Like I haven't read this text all the way through, so in fact,
yeah.
Very would take to be his response, but yeah, I think the primary mode of man's search for meaning is to recognize that yes, we have experiences that shape us, that give us our outlooks on life, just like or make us predisposed to certain things. Just like for me, being a person with a disability, one of the things I do is public speaking and advocating. In particular, for empowering individuals to do what Frankl did. How do you find purpose and meaning? How do you overcome adversity to embrace who you truly are? So yeah, I don't think it is a false dilemma, as Mikey stated, only two options, but I think it is the individual who is able to step out of the past and see the value and maybe the hardship, to then say, I now embrace my future and I want to discover what that means for me. So can I move on to the last section I wanted to talk about with the remainder of our time, or do you have questions?
No, I think you've answered them very well. Please continue.
So with Frankel's statement that the decent and the indecent, I want to talk about personal relationships. How does this viewpoint alter the way we interact with people? How does this, like, it's good for Mike and I to be talking about philosophy and how great it is. Not that we're biased at all. We're totally biased. But how I want to get to the meat of this, which is probably for our listeners. How do we apply this? Like, what does it look like? Like, what does seeing the world in terms of decent and indecent look like to you? And I mean, hey, we live in a world where this in terms of relationships has been more unique than any time in recent history. So, Mike, what do you think that means? And then I'll give my 2 cents on what I think that means.
I'm going to guess that where you're going, I could be wrong, is that since the premise of logotherapy, Frankel's premise, and the premise of many existentialists, is that humans are motivated primarily by desire to find meaning, then the question is, where do we get our meaning? Is our meaning in winning, or is it in the way we play the game? I'm going to put it that way. Is being a decent person, and the things that might entail, maybe as Sartre would say, it's understanding that my actions are the actions of all humanity, that I bear the weight of all humanity. If I live in a way that is where I'm good to people, I'm beneficent and not malevolent. If I love rather than hate, even in the face of hate, if I still love. Maybe I'm a pacifist like Gandhi, or maybe I'm someone who turns the other cheek. If I live a decent life, that may be my source of meaning, rather than how much money I make or how much power I get. If I find somebody's wallet on the ground, do I get more meaning and more satisfaction by turning the wallet in, hoping that the owner will get it back, or by taking the money out of it and getting a little more money for myself? That's where I think maybe you're going, is where do we get meaning in our lives? Is that close?
No, that's good. You actually reminded me of an aspect of Frankel which is important. Meaning and love cannot be disconnected. Frankel supports the idea that you cannot truly know someone unless you love them. Just like friends. Because we can admit that friends, there is love there between friends. Otherwise you wouldn't be friends. There is a mutual respect for each other. A camaraderie. There's a love there. Or more intimately between partners. But what happens when you love someone is you become aware of them for who they are, not for necessarily what you perceive them to be. And this is what I was kind of getting at with the will to power versus the will to meaning, is that the person who's a big shot executive and has all this money and doesn't actually have to do any hard work and has all the ladies and all the fancy cars and whatever else, that's great, but to be happy we must experience love. Now that brings an interesting viewpoint when you talk about perceptions of reality and how with certain mental conditions that is not possible for them if they do not experience emotion. Is love tied to emotion? Not necessarily. I would say it's tied to connection, because it's in the connection where the emotions of love and stuff like that start to develop. So I would say we look for, when we're in relationships, We invest in people by respecting them. We invest in people by engaging with them. And we empower them. I'm thinking of the work I do and trying to empower individuals to see that they can overcome a challenge or an obstacle. Why empower someone? Because we want to see them succeed, and in that way, even if we don't know them, we love them. Because we want the good of them as other, not because of us. Go ahead.
What you are saying is incredibly important, and I just have to comment and put some perspective on what you're saying. What you're talking about is the construction, building a theory of how to treat people and how to relate to people from an existentialist point of view, which is a parallel track, but a different track than the more traditional views of morality and ethics. So Kant and other moral theorists want us to believe that morality originates either as intuition, or as a priori fact, or as directed by God, or as some sort of rational process. And then come the existentialists who either implicitly or explicitly reject those moral codes, which leaves the skeptic, the person skeptic of existentialism, to judge existentialism nihilist as being devoid of morality. But what you are describing is a very different mechanism for the way that an existentialist would arrive at treating people with respect and love and decency, which is based on a different theory than moral codes. I just wanted to point that out. It's really striking to me how in fact existentialists like Sartre and Frankl are very, very concerned with how people live their lives with respect to others, and it comes from a different place than the traditional ethicists.
Yeah. And I think it's a good place to say that even within this love and respect of knowing someone, that does not necessarily mean you have to agree with them. But you respect them because you see them as value. They are valuable because they are them. And love like that, love that is I don't know, but
Yeah, that's very good. It's very good. Back to Kant. I want to point out the big difference, between Kant's view of morality and the way people are to treat others. A huge difference between Kant and the existentialists like Sartre and Frankl. Kant argued that the way one demonstrates his or her moral worth is by doing the right thing, the moral thing, when one doesn't want to. This is one of the paradoxes of Kantian ethics. According to Kant, you're not demonstrating moral worth by doing something that you wanted to do anyway. The way that you show your moral worth is by living up to your moral obligations when you really wanted to do something different. So Kant's view of people is, in a way, it's a very dark view, because he assumes that people almost by default would act in an immoral way, but if they discipline themselves and become educated, then they can force themselves to give up what they really want and do the moral thing. But what you're describing that Frankl teaches, it's quite different, because I think what Frankl teaches and what Sartre teaches is that what's moral, they don't like to use the word, but what would cause someone to love others and treat others with respect is precisely that the person is motivated to do that. They're not forced to do it, they're motivated to do it. They're what they want to do and how they treat people are one and the same. Is that that make sense?
You know, I think what I heard described by someone as I was looking at this struck me. He said, we live in a world which is very, well, actually, I will scratch that just for the sake of for the sake of time and stuff like that. But when we start looking at this concept of the decent and the indecent, we still realize that both of these parties are still people. And versus allowing them to be identified by other factors, they're identified by their actions. And I think that is a powerful shift that Frankl suggests, and that's kind of why I wanted to talk about that within our relationships, right? Is actions speak louder than words, and in this case, I think Frankl applies. You know, I ended with this quote last time, but I'll say it again because it is so beautiful. This paraphrase. The freedom for the homecoming man is the realization that after all he has suffered, he need fear nothing except his God. That is a powerful statement. But if you're an existentialist, although we could talk about existentialism and religion another day would be a very interesting topic. Is that after all we experience, we still know that we matter. We still know that we have meaning. And that it is through those challenges, through those obstacles, that we discover a new part of ourselves. And I think that's, you know, that's been, at least for my journey in philosophy, a powerful realization of using Platonic theory and existentialist thought and others to work through my struggles to see, oh yeah, but this is how that shaped me or whatever. I don't know. Just felt like that was a cool observation.
So the love and the respect and the decency that Frankl and other existentialists describe, is it possible, Tagen, is it possible to feel love and feel respect and want to treat others with love and respect when one has never met those people and don't know who those people specifically are? For example, people in other parts of the world who I've never met, or now I'm going to even take it a step further, future generations, people as yet unborn. If we can extend the theory of love and respect and decency to those people whose names we don't know and who have not been born yet, then it seems to me that that provides a very strong basis and a link between existentialism and justice, environmental justice, intergenerational justice. It provides a basis for reducing one's carbon footprint, reducing one's ecological footprint. Because if I'm a decent person, and if I get meaning in my life by treating others, both people that I've met and people unknown to me, with respect and decency, then that provides a basis for me to, rather than seek material wealth, it provides a basis for me to give up some of my activities which enlarge my ecological footprint and reduce my ecological footprint in order to be respectful of those that come after me. What about that?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think it goes back to Kant, where you know, he basically presents the golden rule, you know, treat others as you would want to be treated. So to acknowledge that future generations unborn deserve the same rights and deserve the abilities that you have is a powerful realization, because it is out of that love we have for ourselves that we should, you know, and that is where the economic wealth aspect comes in, right? Because we want to be better off ourselves. Rather, it should be one where we use those gifts and those talents we have to enrich others because we want to see them succeed.
Yeah, and as I pointed out before, I think the distinction between the Kantian view and the existentialist view would be that Kant would say, treat other people as you want to be treated yourself, because you have an obligation to do so, even though you might not want to. Whereas an existentialist would say, and you pointed this out earlier, Tagen, that Frankl would say that people are looking for meaning in their lives, and treating others with dignity, living a decent life, treating others with respect and love. In fact, my notes here talk about Frankl's optimist triad: love, faith, and hope. These things are entailed within meaning. These things are a part of the meaning in our lives. We want them. We want this meaning. Whereas Kant would say, you don't want it, but you have to do it. You force yourself. That makes you a moral person, because you realize you have a moral obligation and you do it. Even though you really want to steal and cheat and lie, if you don't do it, that shows your moral worth. Whereas the existentialists are, no, love, faith, hope, decency, these are all part of the meaning that we look for in our lives. And you've suggested, and I questioned it, but you've suggested that there's something inherently more meaningful about love than there is about empty pursuit of material wealth, unlimited amounts of power and wealth.
Yeah, you know, it reminds me of a quote from Dead Poet Society. Have you ever seen that movie, Robin Williams?
Mm-mm.
Robin Williams. Anyway, great movie, and he comes in as a teacher to an all-boys academy and teaches poetry, and he says to them, and this will well, actually, how much time we got? Because I kind of want it to be my closing quotation.
Well, go ahead. We have a couple of minutes, so you can.
Okay. Well, yeah. I can always reiterate it at the end, I guess.
Sure. Yeah. Sure.
He says, "We don't read and write poetry because it's cute. We read and write poetry because we are members of the human race. And the human race is filled with passion. It's filled with passion and medicine, law, business, engineering. These are noble pursuits and necessary to stay in life. but it is also filled with faith, love, romance. These are the things we stay alive for. And I think that's what Frankl is getting at, that faith, hope, and love are the things we stay alive for. They're not the things that cause us to stay alive, but we stay alive for them because they enrich our lives. They give us experiences we otherwise would not have.
Yeah, thanks. So my closing observation will be this, and then you can make your closing observation. My closing statement is that look at the difference. The difference between someone like Hobbes. Hobbes, right? The one of the early social contract theorists who asserted that humans by nature are just these selfish, warlike, self-serving individuals, and only through laws and social order and social agreements and enforcement can we protect people from their warlike, miserable natures. Now contrast that with the existentialists that we're talking about today, who have a totally different view of human nature, totally different view that humans inside are pursuing meaning and love and connection and it's just amazing. Right now I think back on some of those philosophers I've learned about, like Machiavelli and Hobbes and those guys, and even Plato. Like how dark those guys are, and how light the existentialists are. The light and the hope that they're bringing. Anyway, that's my closing remark.
Yeah. Well, yeah. The existentialist though does have its dark moments. And maybe we'll talk about that another day. What I would say is my closing statement to our listeners, sorry, not my listeners. Maybe I am egotistical. I don't know. Is this: realize today that this world, as it's perceived and talked about in Dead Poets Society, go watch that movie, but not a sponsorship, but think of it this way: your life, this world we live in, is a great series of events. And when you find your meaning and purpose, that is when you can contribute a verse. That is you contributing to the world in your own unique way. Whether that is, being an educator, being a student, whatever your job is, you contribute because you are finding your meaning and purpose throughout life. So go with that, and go with Frankl. Hold on to faith, hope, and love, and let those guide your week ahead.
Thank you very much, Tagen Marshall, philosophy major at Vancouver Island University. I'm Michael Robert Caditz, alumnus of VIU. You have been watching or listening to the Canadian Philosophy Show. We'll see you next week.
Bye now.